Whispers in the Dark, written by Avril Sabine. Dedication. For my children. I love you because of and regardless of those things that make each of you unique. Book description. The light isn't always your friend. Looking for his teenage children, Larry kidnaps Shelby, convinced she is his daughter. Kept in a dark room, told day after day she's Melissa, Shelby barely manages to remember who she is. Cameron, a voice in the dark room, helps her hold onto her identity, but they have to escape before Shelby forgets who she really is. Chapter 1. Shelby paused at the front door, one hand on the doorknob, the other delving into her large handbag as she checked she had the essentials, including the food she planned to smuggle into the cinema. Why don't you do something different for a change? Her 15-year-old brother, Kyle, glanced up from the television screen as he hit pause on his controller. Like you do? She looked from the PlayStation to her brother, raising her eyebrows. At least I'm getting out of the house. You could invite Courtney here. Kyle grinned. I'd make her feel welcome. Like last time? Freak. Kyle laughed. That girl is hot. That girl, she emphasized the word, is my best friend and too old for you. She said never to invite her over again when you're at home. You creep her out. Find a girl your own age and stop hitting on my friends. Freak. I like older women. 2 years is the perfect age gap. Shelby glared at him. They had the same dark brown eyes and their brown hair was dark enough to be only shades away from black. Kyle had their mother's narrow cheekbones and sharp nose, while she was stuck with their father's rounded cheeks and broader nose. You two aren't fighting again, are you? Their mother, Catherine, paused in the lounge room doorway. Well? Kyle's grin remained in place. I was just asking when Courtney was visiting. Catherine sighed. Do you always have to stir? Shelby glanced at the time on the DVD player. I'm going to be late. Weren't you even going to say goodbye? Catherine asked. Shelby opened the door and flung over her shoulder, bye. That wasn't exactly what I meant. Catherine raised her voice as Shelby started to close the door. Take care. Yeah. Shelby pulled the door shut and strode towards the front gate, squinting at the glare. If it was this warm already in mid-October, summer was going to be a killer. She lifted her long hair off her neck, and wondered if she should have tied it up. Letting it fall back into place, she decided the bus ride wasn't that long, and she'd soon be in the air-conditioned cinema. Shelby reached the empty bus shelter and sat on the bench seat in the shade. Her phone beeped and she rummaged in her bag, grinning when she read the message from Courtney. Horror. Her fingers flew across the keys. Again? It was only moments before she had an answer. Not romance? Well? She sent the single word, then waited a second before she sent the rest of the message. Joking. Of course, horror. Courtney sent her a smiley face and, still grinning, Shelby returned her phone to her handbag. She leaned forward and looked down the street. Still no bus. Typical of Brisbane's public transport. When you wanted them to be late during the week so you didn't have to spend as much time at school, they were always on time. Come Saturday, when you had better things to do than sit around waiting, they were late. She leaned back, her foot tapping. About to reach for her phone again, Shelby stopped as a man entered the bus shelter and sat at the opposite end of the seat from her. She kept her head straight as she checked him from the corner of her eye. He wore faded denim jeans and jacket, had scruffy light brown hair and a matching beard. She guessed he was about her parents' ages, mid-40s. When a beeping came from him, the man pulled out a phone and Shelby had to turn away momentarily as she hid a smile. The phone had to be ancient. The type of phone that had probably started the use of the word brick when describing old phones. Her smile under control, Shelby turned back to see the man patting the pockets of his jacket. The man swore and turned towards her, holding out his phone. "Could you read my message to me? I've left my glasses at home." Shelby looked between the outstretched hand and the footpath in front of the bus shelter. There was no way she wanted to close the small distance between them. She'd rather stand in the sun. "Here." The man placed the phone on the seat, and shoved it so it slid across the metal to rest against her leg. Okay. She picked up the phone and stared at the dark screen. How did something this ancient work? Just because he was old, it didn't mean he had to use old technology. The button on the side. The right side. At the top. Shelby pushed the button and nothing happened. "Maybe your battery's flat." She looked towards the man. He frowned. "Actually, it might be the one at the front. Down the bottom, in the middle. The large button." Shelby slid her thumb across the face of the phone to the large button and pressed down. A fine mist sprayed into her face and she dropped the phone with a yelp, coughing and wiping at her face with the back of her hand. Rising to her feet, she turned to face the man. She started to back away, hitting her shoulder on the edge of the shelter. What?" she broke off, coughing. "Everything will be all right, Melissa." The man picked up his phone, then reached out towards her. Shelby tried to take a step back, but the ground felt like it shifted under her. I don't." She reached for the edge of the shelter, missing it as it swam in front of her. She would have fallen if the man hadn't put an arm around her waist. "It's all right, I'm taking you home." "Home?" Shelby tried to focus. The world around her shimmered and danced, and her brain felt muddled. She didn't what? She couldn't think. A moment of clarity had her trying to pull away. "I don't know you." "Come on. We can talk when we get home." The man guided her along the footpath, his arm keeping her at his side. Beneath her feet, the concrete buckled and twisted like they were in the middle of an earthquake. She closed her eyes and stumbled beside him. "Him?" Her eyes flew open and she tried to pull away again. "Who are you?" The man opened the door of a white sedan and gently pushed her into the seat. He smiled and the skin around his green eyes crinkled. "I know I've got a perfect disguise when my own daughter doesn't recognize me." He pulled the seatbelt across her, clicked it into place and closed the door before he strode towards the driver's side. "Daughter?" "Her father." Shelby frowned. Her father had black hair. Pitch black. Blacker than bitumen. Blacker than, what was black? She tried to remember. Something was black. The sound of a car door closing made her jump, and she turned towards the man seated beside her. She frowned. "Who are you?" "You'll feel better once the drugs wear off. Then you'll remember. Just rest. It won't be long and we'll be home. Everything will be all right." He patted her leg, then with another smile started the engine. "Home." Shelby continued to frown. She was meant to be going somewhere. Where? Horror. Something about horror. She shook her head, trying to think. Movement caught her attention and she turned to meet her own dark brown eyes. A giggle escaped as she reached out towards herself. Her fingers encountered a cold, smooth surface and she giggled again as she realized it was a mirror. A hand drew hers back and she turned towards the man. His image swam before her and her stomach lurched. "Rest. You'll feel better if you rest." Shelby nodded and closed her eyes. Her stomach settled slightly as she listened to the hum of the engine. There was something she had to do. She fought against the lethargy that settled over her. Her eyes refused to open and her body felt like it was made of stone. The hum of the engine surrounded her, drowning out all other sensations.